A few years ago, I had to move back in with my parents after splitting with my now ex and being diagnosed with the start of a chronic condition. My parents had the house on the market and wanted to move up north, back to where we were from. House prices are a lot cheaper here, and so they went from an average size 4-bedroom semi into an affluent commuter town near London to a large 5-bedroom house set on 6 acres in the countryside, complete with a bungalow on the land. I lived in the bungalow as being disabled. This meant I could have a house that is adapted and could be independent but have my parents close by for when I'm struggling. I got a job as a teacher at a local school and have been working there for a month or two before this event took place. Here's the story. A colleague, EC for entitled colleague from now on, an EC of mine who I only knew through work, and even not that very well, overheard me talking to a close colleague, we'll say CC for close colleague from now on, about my lambs. I was showing her the pictures and asked whose those were. CC explained they were mine and pets to keep the paddocks grass down and being friendly and loving my pets, and showing them off to anyone who gave the tiniest hint of interest. I showed EC the photos, one of which had a part of my parents' house in the background. EC asked whose house that was, and I said my parents'. EC starts asking questions about it. Thinking she was just being nice or getting to know me, I showed her the photos, as we had just moved here a few months before. It was from the estate agents, and thinking that EC knew I was new and knew very few people and figured this was why she was taking an interest in getting to know me. Well, the photos obviously showed my parents' house inside, their beautiful large manicured garden, my bungalow, the woodland that surrounds 3 sides of the land and the paddock. Well, our lunch break duty ended and we all go back to our classrooms. I think nothing more of the conversation other than how nice it was getting to know more people. An hour later, EC sent me an email. Quote, nice, I think, assuming it was about earlier and then I'm starting to get to know more people at work. By the way, I'm really shy until I get to know people, which makes making friends hard. This was until I read the email. EC has invited herself to use my parents' house the following Saturday afternoon to host her 8-year-old's birthday party. I thought it was a joke at first until I read all her plans. Cooking party food in my parents' kitchen, moving all the furniture out of the lounge. It's a massive lounge that's the size of my nearly whole bungalow, so they can play party games, even going as far to say that my parents needed to move any valuables out as she would not be responsible for anything getting broken. Setting up a big bouncy castle in the garden, feeding the lambs and providing refreshments for any parents or adults who stayed. You'd think this was entitled enough, but the cherry on the cake. EC, her husband, and 2 children had invited themselves to stay overnight before the party. Quote, to be ready and set up everything and make sure it's all good to go. And they want to stay the Saturday night because they would be, quote, too tired after setting up the party, running the party, and she won't be able to drive home after having a drink because, quote, kids. She informed me and my parents that she would need 2 rooms. Both ensure as she did not share bathrooms with people she doesn't know. But apparently, she's perfectly happy to host a children's party in a house of people she doesn't know. And that she wanted fresh linen and towels for her arrival, and a key to the house to make things easier to set up. I could not believe what I was reading. This wasn't a cheeky, can you ask your parents if a total stranger and a near stranger to me can use their house for a children's party? No. It was an email informing me that this is happening and that it doesn't matter if my parents have plans and are away because, quote, they can just leave us the key. My jaw must have hit my desk upon reading the email as CC, we shared a classroom, asked me what happened and seemed concerned for me. She read the email and burst out laughing. Apparently, EC had a habit of just inviting herself places, but this took the biscuit. Unsure of how to handle this bizarre situation, but knowing, of course, the answer from my parents would be a firm no without even asking, I emailed entitled colleague back and politely regretfully informed her that sadly that weekend we were hosting a large family get-together at the house, and that she had thought of maybe hiring a soft play center. Guys, EC replied that soft play would cost money. Yes, she wasn't even going to pay my parents. And that she was upset my parents could not share their wealth with the less fortunate, but had promised her daughter to host the party on her birthday, so sadly could not use our house the following weekend. My parents had a good laugh when I showed them the email, and I avoided EC as much as possible after this one. Luckily, I was forced into very early, I'm in my 30s, medical retirement 2 months later, so I managed to avoid any more random colleagues, especially EC, inviting themselves to host parties at my parents' house or to use it as a hotel. Sweet home Alabama. I know. I'm 21 female, South Indian, and it's, quote, culturally accepted to marry into families. There's many reasons like keeping the wealth in the family. But now, times have changed and lower middle class families like mine do not support this. My dad's mom wants me to marry my aunt's, dad's sister's son, who's 29. This is so funny as I type it. Her reasoning is that she has to see one marriage at least before she dies. My dad has told her no one should bring up the topic of marriage to me until I'm done with studies. My mom, who's 42, has told her that I have to earn and do higher studies. She said to my mom, how much more do you want to earn now? What you got is enough. Mind you, we're not that well off. Still living in a rented house, and I've taken educational loans for my studies. My granny says if I wants to study, then my aunt will pay for it. Oh, and also, my uncle ducked my dad over and scammed him in their business. They both were partners. My granny clearly has her favorite children and never has supported my dad and us, but rather enabled my uncle. Her other reasonings is that my cousin likes me. I don't know if this is true, and if so, ew. She's telling that if I married the cousin, my aunt would construct a flat in her land, and my dad's land, which are next to each other, and the house would be for me and my cousin. Also, my dad and mom were cousins. It's ducked up, but please don't bash them, which makes marrying into family even a higher risk. My mom's family was super poor at that point, and again, my granny had no choice but to marry her daughters off, as they did not have proper meals to eat. My mom's parents thought that they would take good care of my mom as its family, but they didn't. But my dad was good and looked after her good to his abilities until we got scammed, and we're still getting scammed by my uncle. I have my parents who are getting old, and I have a younger sister. My dad's land hasn't been legally transferred to my dad yet, so it's my grandma's at the moment. She's basically brainwashing my dad and emotionally and financially abusing him. My dad's 55 this year, so he's scared about our future. If anything, I blame my granny of filing such thoughts in his head of my cousin from such a young age. Telling I was his future wife, I remember him at around age 12, asking me if I would marry him. I felt weirded out. What can I do? Any constructive help is welcome, please drop a comment. So, as the story reads, my childhood best friend has 2 dads. How come? Well, his first dad, Stan, I changed the names, obviously. Stan had him and his wife that were the first story. That's where it begins. Also, this is very long since it covers the EP stories of both dads. A little backstory for Stan. His parents must have been really cool, and from what he told me, I think they always knew that Stan had a thing for men. Even if Stan himself did not know it. They were really wealthy as well. This is important later. Stan's wife at the time, Karen, was very homophobic and racist, but Stan seemed to black it out somehow. His parents clarified in their will that they don't want Karen to get anything of their money when they pass away because of this. Well, the worst case scenario happened and they died in an accident. And at the same time, Stan realized that he might not be as straight as he thought. He and his brother got all the money their parents left them, and Karen was really excited, since she thought she's gonna get some. Spoiler alert, she didn't. And she was very unsupportive during that time, and she was very greedy. But guess who was supportive? That's right, Daniel, dad number 2. They met recently, and when Daniel was there for Stan, Stan realized that he might not be as straight as he thought, and Karen realized that too. As a result, she became very abusive and filed for divorce, full custody, and Stan's parents' heritage. She even got physically abusive, and Stan did nothing about it. Well, he actually recorded it, so when they went to divorce court, he simply presented his parents' will and the recordings, and Karen did not stand a chance. Shortly after the divorce, Stan and Daniel officially started dating. They married pretty soon, and with his parents' money, Stan helped Daniel to start his own business. This brings us to Daniel's story. Daniel had more luck with his first real partner, which was Stan, but less luck with his parents. He came out pretty soon, with 16 or something, and promptly got kicked out. He was keeping himself alive with minimum wage jobs and had to drop out of school before he graduated because he was capable of work. Well, one day, he met this cute guy who had just lost his parents and had problems with his wife. Just a side note, he did not know about Stan's wealth back then. He decided to approach him, be supportive, and maybe they will start a friendship. Well, this is exactly what happened. During his minimum wage jobs, he had a lot of time to think. It was a brain-dead job like stocking shelves. So, he developed a business idea. Once they were in a relationship, Stan found out about his Daniel's plans, and he was more than happy to become his business partner. They had a great start, and their business is doing well. This is where the entitlement comes from. His parents kicked him out, disowned him, and told him that they were not his parents anymore. They did not have any children. Daniel did the same thing Stan did when he was abused. He recorded everything. Their business has something to do with real estate or property management, and when Daniel's parents decided to move, they ran into him as they wanted to rent a house from him. When they saw the lease, they suddenly realized that their landlord was their son. He was alive and doing really well. They started acting like they missed him, that they were sorry, and they began looking for him immediately after they kicked him out as they realized their mistake. But they just couldn't find him anymore. Daniel called Cap and told them that he knew they only wanted his money. They began saying he owed them as they gave him 16 wonderful years. But Daniel called Cap again, as they were never good parents, and even if they were, all of this would have been neutralized by them kicking him out. Needless to say that Daniel and Stan did not sign the lease anymore.